All right. Starts first of all, give Jason. All right. We'll start with a praise to Manjushri. You're excused. No worries. Obeisance to my guru and protector Manjushri, who holds in his heart the scriptural text embodies of his things or things as they are, whose understanding shines forth as the sun unclouded by defilements or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways with the patient love of Father for his only Son, all creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You, as dragon thought and proclamation of the Dhamma, rises us from the stupor of our delusions and frees us from the iron chains of our karma, whose powerful sword of wisdom hews our sufferings whatever sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of all ignorance. I entreat you, Manjushri's princely body is adorned with the 112 marks of a Buddha, who has completed the 10 stages, achieving the highest perfection of a Bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning. O Manjushri, O loving one, with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness enclosed in my mind, enlighten my intelligence and wisdom so I might gain insight into the Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the highest assembly, from the accumulations that I collect by listening to the teachings, maintaining the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the highest assembly, from the accumulations that I collect by listening to the teachings, maintaining the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I'll go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the highest assembly, from the accumulations that I collect by listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. All right. So good afternoon, everyone. Terry is saying that he meant to ask about the qualities of desire that Geshe-la talked about in verse 87. Could you expand on that, please? Let's look at all right, the qualities of having obtained independence. It is independence from, as far as I remember, that it's independence from desire, from attachment. Let's look at the verse itself. Okay. So having dwelt for as long as they wish in empty houses, at the foot of trees and in caves, having abandoned the suffering of owning and guarding possessions, they are carefree without concern. So I think that you can understand it, that sense of independence, of freedoms, in probably on two levels. The cost level, if we have no strong desire, no strong attachment to our dwellings, to our possessions, to our wealth, and also to another person, we can gain a certain level of independence where we are free to roam wherever we are, and we can apply our mind to our practice. So this is the type of independence I think that Shantideva here refers to. So in one of the verses that we've covered in the previous module, we spoke about, there was this question that Shantideva put up, and he said, when will I dwell in those forests where I will not hold to things as mine? So whenever we have that thought of this is mine, we have to, first of all, be busy with protecting what is mine, but also just take care for a certain place to keep it out. So for example, when we look at the houses that we have and how much work we have to put into, first of all, accumulating the money that is needed in order to get a place, how much effort we need to put in place in order to keep that place. And then if things break, if things go if things go to waste, we still need to maintain, of course, the house that we have or the dwelling. Then there is also the pain that comes from the things that belong to us being destroyed. So here Shantideva is speaking of how you will gain that certain level of independence when you do not hold to things as mine, when you're free to roam wherever you are. So here Shantideva says, when you practice in forests, at the foot of a tree and so forth, when I was sitting at home and thinking about this material, I thought that it's quite a kind of, it seems like a romantic setup for a place of practice. But then when we look at our way of living, it seems that we need still to go through quite a great length or distance in order to get to the point where we can just be completely carefree. But also, this environment that we have here in Australia, where we have private properties and national parks that you might sit in or whatever. I mean, will you find places that you can roam around freely and practice at the foot of trees or in caves for years and months, or maybe for the rest of your life? Probably not. Mm. Yeah. So Venerable Chukila is saying that it might have been a possibility 100 years ago or more when looking at the Aboriginal way of life, where there was also not that idea of private property owning and so forth, but probably not anymore. So I think that we can still know when we think, where? In which area? In the Pilbara in WA. But still, I think that, in terms of working out, so we're studying Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, and we're learning how to gain a certain level of independence so that we can apply our mind to our practice. So Shantideva here presents an ideal situation, something that we can look forward to. But then in terms of translating what Shantideva says to our everyday necessities and what we can work with, we can find probably ways that will work for us in terms of at least getting some level of mental freedom from attachment, so that our mind, not only our body would be less busy with working in order to accumulate, maintain, and protect whatever we have, but also mentally that we will not be constantly bothered by all those things. I have a friend, for example, that has some money in the stock market. So whenever and I think that he has quite a nice way of living. And whenever I see them, it seems that they're always, every hour or two, they're on the computer to check what's happening in the stock market, buying and selling and so forth. So you could say that ideally they're set up to, with their own place, with their own, very nice, comfortable lifestyle, having, I think, enough money that will last them for the rest of their life if they want to do kind of serious meditation retreat. But then this thing that comes with kind of grasping at things as mine and having to maintain that does not give one the freedom to actually do that. I mean, I don't know if they actually want to do that. I mean, it seems that maybe this is not even on the cards, but Shantideva says that here, when you gain freedom from attachment, you gain independence. Mm. Mm. That's nice. Yeah. 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 So Chukila is saying that she knows a couple in the Blue Mountains. they have a house and they worked out the ground floor, the basement maybe, or the ground floor, built it as a practice place with an altar and so forth. So the guy was doing a 3-year retreat. And then when he finished, and his partner, his wife, went into the 3-year retreat, and they were supportive of each other. So that's that's a really nice way of doing that. Also, when I think of, for example, I have some of you might know Corey and Kirsty, which no, they have a house, they have jobs and so forth, but they're also very supportive of each other in terms of doing retreats. So if one of them wants to retire for a 2-month retreat, 3-month retreat, either by themselves or doing a group retreat with Alan Wallace and so forth, they have a really nice situation where they support each other. So of course, and you said it also in the discussion group, someone said that when they have their own house, their own home, they are free to do the practice. They don't need to rely upon rental properties and so forth. So as I said, this is the ideal. Shantideva here is depicting a world that is probably outside of the realm of possibilities in the environment that we live in, either here in Australia or people that listen to those teachings in the US. I think that probably still it's hard to find a place that matches Shantideva's description. Maybe easier in the US, I don't know. But you can still look at Shantideva's message and see the drawbacks in attachment, and work on reducing some level of attachment so that we'll just have more mental space for mental development. All right. What I wanted to do today was to finish off the first part in chapter number 8, which is something that we've done today, and also to set the scene for the second part of chapter number 8. So first part was ridding yourself of things which are not conducive to calm abiding, to shamatha. The second part is meditating on shamatha. And as we started off today, it seems that the second part of the second part of chapter number 8 is teaching the practice of equalizing and exchanging self with others. So you might cast your mind back to the way that we started off chapter number 8, and we said that in presenting a unique way of cultivating calm abiding, the uniqueness in this presentation can be explained in 2 ways. One of them is the motivation for developing calm abiding is bodhicitta. So it is a unique Mahayana motivation. Certainly, it is different to non-Buddhist practitioners who practice samadhi or dhyana in the Indian traditions or other traditions. So doing it with a bodhicitta motivation is unique. But also, more specifically, you can also choose bodhicitta as an object for the development of calm abiding. So not only the motivation, but also the object that you use for your observation. So today we started off with how to meditate on the equality of self and others. And Geshe said that you can also use the equality of self and others as an object of meditation for cultivating calm abiding. So, but before we get to this unique explanation of the way to develop bodhicitta, let's finish off the section that explains how to prepare ourselves to the practice in ridding ourselves of what is not conducive to calm abiding. So I looked at Khenpo Kumpen's presentation, and he highlights certain points in the explanation which I thought are useful for us. So when we look at the outline to begin with, in abandoning erroneous conception, we spoke a lot about desire and how desire, first of all, it involves fear, and then we spoke about reflecting on the unclean nature of the body and so forth in attempting to reduce the amount of attachment that we have. And here Shantideva's explanation is mainly dealing with attachment to desire, which have to do mainly with sexual desire, or in general, I think that we can also understand that as just a wish for intimacy with another person, right? Not always our impulses are only sexual impulses. Sometimes we just seek the security and intimacy in relationships. So this is what Shantideva is explaining here. But then there are also other sides to attachment, like as we said before, attachment to wealth and possessions and so forth. So we had a very long explanation with many details, gore details about the unclean nature of the body, what you find in cemeteries, and also reflecting on the aspects of those who are alive. So this is what we've covered in the last couple of weeks. Then in looking at Khenpo Kumpen's presentation, it says, well, when you reflect on how desire produces all sorts of unwanted things, from verse 71 to verse 79, up until this point, let's say, being under the control of others and so forth, we speak of the injuries that you sustain because of attachment. So it says you need to reflect upon the many injuries that result from attachment. So we spoke about attachment to sexual desire, attachment to intimacy or relationship, and then it says there are many injuries that you get from that. And then it says, from verse 79 onwards, it speaks about it acts to hinder liberation and puts to waste the leisures and endowments and so forth. Here he also dwells upon not only sexual desire and desire for intimacy, he also speaks about giving up attachment to wealth and possessions. So the transition from speaking about the unclean nature of the body and ridding ourselves of desire, of reducing desire, sexual desire, desire for intimacy, to also reducing attachment to wealth and possession is not very clear. The transition is not very clear. But when you look at what Shantideva says from point C, right? So it is connected to the faults of numerous unwanted consequences from point C, D, and E. It speaks about how a lack of contentment in general is what lands us in so many different problems. It gives us suffering, a lack of contentment. And we have not only a lack of contentment with the relationship that we have with others, but in general, we have a big lack of contentment in terms of the resources, the money, the enjoyments that we have. I mean, particularly when we look at this point in time, this day and age, and how it seems that everything around us is telling us that we're still lacking resources, we're still lacking enjoyment, we're still lacking comfort. And only if we buy the new thing on the market, only if we have new phone and computers and clothes and cars and so forth, only then we can find contentment and happiness. The environment is geared up to making us feel kind of inadequate, not good enough, not sufficient. So Shantideva says that so long as you have that lack of contentment in general, for that long, you will not be able to attain the state of liberation or omniscience. So looking again at the outline, right? So it starts from verse 79 CD. It acts to hinder liberation and puts to waste the leisure and endowments. Let's look at this actually. So in giving up attachment to wealth and possessions, we begin with verse 79. Let's look briefly at verse 79. Due to the torment of collecting, guarding, and losing it, I should understand wealth to be infinite problems. Those who are distracted by the attachment to wealth have no opportunity to attain freedom from the suffering of cyclic existence, right? So up to verse 78, including verse 78, we spoke mainly about the troubles and problems that we find in order to get into a relationship, to sustain the relationship, to prevent the relationship from declining. Some lustful people even have their body cut, and some are impaled on the points of sticks, some are stabbed with daggers, and others are burned. Such things are seen. I think they're probably not that much in our environment. I haven't seen too many people impaled on sticks or tridents so far, luckily. But I guess that maybe it was more, the burning and definitely stabbing and murdering. Sorry? Stove deaths in India. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you hear about horrible cases of, things that are related to attachment around the world, not only stabbing, killing and so forth, but also throwing acid on people, and it's just horrible. Anyway, so verse 79 then transitions also to speak about attachment to wealth and so forth. So Khenpo Kumpen says, first of all, there's the trouble of accumulating the property that previously one did not have. Then there is the trouble of protecting it from damage. Finally, there's the trouble that comes when it is destroyed by thieves and burglars. In order to amass and protect their property, the horses and possessions, all members of society of whatever class, kings, lamas, ministers, must get up early and go to bed late. They must be constantly vigilant day and night, enduring all the discomforts of heat and cold, hunger and thirst. They have to put up with fatigue and neglect their body's need, and they are tormented by every sort of discomfort. Now, it reminds me that when we spoke about, so here is, it speaks about the hard work that that people have to put into, that have to put up with in order to get what they want. It reminds me that a few years ago when I went to Israel on a visit, I met someone that was my commander in the army. So I was with the Israeli army for 12 years as a software engineer, and my commander was a woman. And she was one, I guess, it was not very common at the time to have, first of all, women reaching such high rank, but also in the high-tech industry in the army. And she was very much a career woman. Also, her husband was a career person. They had 3 kids, and she started a day of work at 7 o'clock in the morning, finished it normally at 6 o'clock in the evening, 7 o'clock in the evening, and everything was done in a rushed way because there was quite a lot of pressure, and I attended quite a few meetings towards the end of my work with the army, and she was kind of very stressed and busy, and it was just day in and day out. And the kids were quite young, and every once in a while during meetings, they used to call and complain and cry. They had problems at school and so forth. And you can see the stress in trying to juggle everything up. So I left the army when I was 30. A few years ago, I ran into her in Israel. That was probably not having seen her for 10, 15 years. And she was limping. So I was having a conversation with her, and she said that she got sick with MS, and it is likely that quite soon, she will find herself in a wheelchair, and her body will decline and so forth. And I couldn't kind of not think of how. I wonder if, in hindsight, whether she would make the same choices. Like, think about being so worn out, so extended to the max, stretched to the max, where every day is kind of a struggle and stress and so forth. Of course, you feel a sense of satisfaction and meaning when you ascend the ranks and do things that other people did not get to do, and get the recognition that others did not get to. But then, since it also, there is a lot of stress and effort that is involved with that, and I wonder, at some point you get to think that actually maybe if I could go back, I would have changed my priorities, be more available to others, and so forth. So anyway, so then So then we move on to what Shantideva says, that it acts to hinder liberation and puts to waste the leisures and endowments. And so we read through verse 79, then it says, desirous people have many disadvantages, such as this and little benefit. In the same way, oxen alike drawing carriages eat a few mouthfuls of grass. Even oxen alike can achieve this. Those who are pained by their actions destroy the perfect leisure and endowment so difficult to find for the sake of something of little benefit, which is not so rare. So we spoke about it yesterday. I think that this point is quite clear, but one of the points that Khenpo Kumpel mentioned is in his commentary, we have thought that kind of, at least suddenly, it was kind of a strong point for me. They said that often we chase after pleasure that might be a strong pleasure, but it's just one moment of pleasure. So we go through all the turmoil of cyclic existence again and again and again, and we chase after happiness or pleasure, and we get that, but it's just one moment of pleasure, and then we continue with the process. I thought it's a good point, an excellent point that it was making. I'll just read through that in page 279. As it has been explained, people with many desires must suffer much, and all for very little joy. At the very most, there is a single instant of pleasure when consciousness meets the object of desire. Such people act like oxen pulling a hay cart. They chew a mouthful of grass, and then the wheels of the cart jolt, and they are wretched with pain. So I was thinking about it. When I was reading through this commentary at home, I was thinking that right after ordination, not right after, in the first few months after ordination, I was still kind of quite unsettled, a little bit panic after ordination. And I thought of things that I've done before and the things that I've given up. And then I thought that, one of the things, of course, that you have to give up when you become ordained is sex or sexual relationship. One of the things that kind of I used to think of at the time when it was I was still kind of a little bit unrestful, is that it's quite interesting with sex, kind of when such a sexual desire is such a strong impulse. And even if you get that, then you might have like a really good night out. It will you might have fun for 50 minutes, for half an hour, if you really want to go for long, then a few hours, but then it's finished. So just in terms of, I think, and some of it have unwanted consequences, like kids, if you don't want to have, if you don't want kids. Yeah. Anyway, I thought that, in terms of, at least, at least in terms of ordination, sometimes it's quite interesting that kind of you want to live your life as a monastic, and some people lose their ordination because of having because succumbing to sexual desire. But then at the end, it's like you give up a life of ordination for a few minutes of pleasure. I mean, it's not just a few minutes of pleasure once in your life. You might have it, when you leave ordination and you again go back into the market. So, let's say that even if you have it every day or a few times a week, still the amount of time that kind of you have pleasure, considering the other times where you have to do other things. At least kind of still seems to me like a good bargain. Anyway, so that's one thought that came to me. Another one was when you have a few years ago, when I stayed with my sister in one of my visits to Israel, she has 3 daughters, and they were still pretty young. One of them was 8, 2 others were 5, I think, or maybe they were younger. And every day seems like a battlefield, right? So you have to, they have to wake up at 5:30 or 6 o'clock. They're getting ready to go to kindy, and then my sister and her husband has to also go to work, and then they come back afternoon and have to make food, and then everyone needs to take a bath and then to go to bed. Everything is a struggle. And that they wake up in the morning and they bicker with each other and they fight who's going to brush their teeth first, who's going to do it last, who's going to use the loo first, who's going to do it last, who's going to use this or the other one is going to lose it. Everything is done with so much stress. And then my sister and brother-in-law kind of are all on edge. Both of them were on edge, trying to get everything done to get the kids to the school bus so that they can go to work. And then afternoon, when everyone comes back from school and my sister and my brother-in-law come back from work, if they get a good shift or connection, then everything starts over again. The stress in making dinner and cleaning up and sending everyone to bed. And I was looking at it from the outside, and my sister said that kind of the best thing that happened to her in her life is having kids. And she enjoys every bit of it. But when I looked at their everyday routine, I saw actually so much stress and unhappiness. Unhappiness, not like a deep sense of unhappiness, but everything was done with a lot of stress and angst. And because of that, also my sister and her husband were kind of also bickering with each other. I hope that they're not kind of listening to this recording. I think I'm doing quite okay. They're likely to not go online. But anyway, it seems that there was this description of how wonderful life is when you have kids. But then when I looked at the everyday reality, in the, let's say, the week that I stayed with them, I thought of actually lots of stress, lots of fear, lots of anxiety, and a few minutes of happiness. And I think that probably the love that the parents have to the kids is so deep that it becomes very meaningful. But still, when you, at least when I started to think about it in terms of time spent, how many moments during the day one can spend in just being happy about and content about being a parent, and how much time there is actually being unhappy, anxious, fearful, and so forth. I thought actually it's quite interesting that people describe kids as just happiness. Of course, there's happiness, but there's also a lot of heartache. Anyway, so I thought about it in light of what Khenpo Kumbin says here. At the very most, there is a single instant of pleasure when consciousness meets the object of desire. Such people are like oxen pulling a hay cart. They chew a mouthful of grass, and then the wheels of the cart jolt, and the wheel of the cart jolt, and they are wretched with pain. These paltry enjoyments of food and shelter that even dumb cattle are able to get for themselves are not so rare. They're easily acquired, but at the cost of how much mischief. For the sake of them, those tormented by their evil karma destroy the precious human existence, so difficult to find, and endowed with freedoms and advantages, together with all the perfect qualities needed for the accomplishment of Buddhahood. So it's very, I think that when you start to think about it like that, it can be actually quite confronting. I mean, we seek happiness, and as Shukida said yesterday, we often think that happiness is out there, or that we try to come up with a certain scheme by which we can keep everything outside, kind of all the enjoyments that we have outside, and we tell ourselves that it's okay to have them because I'm unattached to them. I can still develop my mind. I can still do a serious practice in keeping all the external things. If you can do that, that's excellent. I mean, thumbs up. But I think that for most people, it doesn't work like that unless we kind of try to bring about some balance. And I think that to bring some balance is not to cut and run immediately, but at least try to, bit by bit, see if we can reduce the attachment that we have to external things that cause us pleasure. And they do cause us some pleasure, but as we say, this is mostly suffering of change. It stays for a short time, and then it changes into something that is not satisfactory anymore. So if we can reduce that, that's excellent. So then, so Shantideva says that it puts to waste freedoms and richnesses, freedoms and endowments, which means that we have less time to work for the sake of liberation and enlightenment. And this is what we see in the outline. right? So the outline says, so it acts to hinder liberation and puts to waste leisures and endowments, and then developing the mind that strives for liberation by reflecting on its disadvantages, the disadvantages of desire, and thinking that actually if I stay like that for the end of time or for eons on end, I will not be liberated from samsara. It will still continue. And then let's quickly look at this section. It reminds me, actually, kind of spoke about my sister and the husband and the family. And all of my sister's pregnancy are IVF. So she also went through such hardship, so many hormones and treatments and so forth that she had to go through, and painful procedure to have kids. So of course, for her, kind of kids are so meaningful, but still also hard work. So it also reminds me that once when I was traveling 20 years ago in Tibet with one of my previous girlfriends, and at some point we thought that she might get pregnant, and I felt like, oh my God, I'm going to prison for the rest of my life. Anyway, that was the moment in which the penny dropped, and I thought myself, probably I was not made for family and relationship. Anyway, so verse 83, that's what I wanted to look at. If Buddhahood itself is achieved with just 1/1,000,000th of that difficulty, the desires have greater suffering than practitioners of enlightenment, but there is no enlightenment. So one thing that occurred to me when I thought of verse 83 is that it says that if you put 1/1,000,000th of the effort that you put into samsara, you would be able to attain the state of enlightenment. But you don't do that, or we don't do that. We have desire, and for a desirous person, there is no enlightenment. And I thought that it's a really interesting point to think of, because when I think of my attitude towards Dharma practice in general, like meditating on loving kindness and compassion and bodhicitta and wisdom realizing emptiness, developing calm abiding, it requires a lot of effort. It seems that actually, if you want to develop qualities of abandonments and realizations, you have to work extremely hard. You have to give up attachment. You have to give up some comforts, attachment of this. You have to give up sensual pleasures and so forth, and be more invested in spiritual progress. So for us, it seems that this is hard work. Whereas if you don't do that, you can take it easy, right? So it seems that Shantideva here is presenting actually an attitude that is completely contrary to the way that we used to think. We are used to thinking that if I just continue to do what I do, I can be quite non-committal in my teachings, not invest too much in. Sorry, I can be non-committal in my studying. I can study half-heartedly. I don't have to contemplate it deeply. If it just makes me feel good, that's okay. If I don't do a serious meditation practice, if my meditation practice is just 10 minutes a day or 1 hour a day, it's enough. I don't have to do more than that. I can enjoy life. Dharma is kind of, if I put more time into study, reflection, meditation, it will be really hard. Shantideva here actually is saying that actually we got it completely the wrong way. Because if we spend the time that we spend on other things that are not study, reflection, meditation, if we spend that time, or at least one fraction of the time, in doing study, reflection, and meditation long ago, we could have been Buddhas. So maybe I think that it's a nice way to think about it, just in terms of working with our mind. Whenever we think that to study, reflect, and meditate is a hard thing, to study Shantideva's text is a hard thing, to meditate on bodhicitta is really difficult, to meditate on shamatha is difficult, maybe we should immediately come up with a counter argument. To stay in samsara is difficult, I mean, doing it day in and day out from one life to the next, this is difficult. This is hard work. Having to kind of again and again work hard in order to attain a precious human rebirth. So that we'll enjoy a certain level of comfort, just a pleasant rebirth. That's hard work. If I do it for eons on end, that's a long time. That's very difficult. If I just meditate on loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta, the steps of the path to enlightenment, small scope, medium scope, and great scope, I'll be able to be free from liberation, free from samsara, to attain the state of liberation and become Buddha. So I thought it's kind of nice to create this opposite vision. Anyway, that's verse 83. Then we begin with cultivating joy for isolation. So I think that those verses are quite, so verses 85 to 88. Let's just look at them briefly. Having in this way developed disillusion to objects of desire, I should generate joy for solitude within pacified forests devoid of disputes and afflictions. The fortunate ones, the joyful mentions of vast flat stones, cooled by sandalwood moonlight, and by the stirring peaceful forest breeze free from noise. Think of what is of benefit for others and stroll there. They dwell for as long as they wish in empty houses at the foot of trees and in caves, having abandoned the suffering of owning and guarding possessions. They are carefree without concern. Utilizing freely without attachment, having no ties with anyone. Even lords have difficult finding that which is the enjoyment of happy contentment. So I think that this section is quite clear. What I wanted to read through is what Khenpo Kumpel says at the bottom of page 281 in his commentary. Actually, it's in the middle of the page rather than the bottom, middle of the page. So he says, in this section, which deals with the gathering of the conditions conducive for meditative concentration, right? So we spoke about ridding yourself of what is not conducive to calm abiding, but also relying upon the conducive conditions for calm abiding. We drew from Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chenmo, which spoke of the 6 prerequisites of calm abiding: dwelling in a suitable place, having pure ethical discipline, being more content, having less desire, giving up many activities and giving up on thoughts of desire and so forth. So when you gather all those conditions, gathering the conditions conducive to meditative concentration, the excellence of solitude is alluded on 2 separate occasions. There's no mistake in this. So this is quite a nice explanation. It says the first mention is made to inspire us with a delight in solitude and to make us want to go and stay there. Later, however, when after taking up residence, we feel unable or unwilling to stay, owing to insufficient provisions or because of a longing for companionship, it might be helpful to remind ourselves of the qualities of solitude, so much praised by the Buddha and Bodhisattvas. The repetition is to encourage us to remain firmly and joyfully in such a place. So here, Khenpo Kulpen says that make no mistakes in how Shantideva is explaining the way to rely on solitude. There's, first of all, you go into solitude, which means that you first of all need to have contemplated how you rid yourself of the hustle and bustle of the world in order to go into solitude. But then also, when you remain in solitude, there's still sometimes a sense of discontentment that makes you want to leave your retreat, you leave your solitude because you desire companionship, because you desire enjoyments, possessions, or so forth, or you're just worried about them. So Shantideva here explains those two levels, how to, from the beginning, enter into solitude, but then also how to maintain that, how to remain in solitude in developing a sense of contentment. So this is what we have spoken about so far in relation to chapter 8. And then the second part of chapter 8 begins with the meditation of equalizing and exchanging self with others, how to cultivate calm abiding, the way to meditate on the equality of self and others, and then the way to exchange self with others. So I'm wondering, before we get into some of the points in that section, if you have any questions or points related to the things that we've covered up until now. Any questions? So do we need to have developed this stable contentment before we enter shamatha? I think that as far as I remember, Lama Tsongkhapa says that if you develop the prerequisites of to shamatha, which is having lesser desire and being more content, you'll find shamatha, you'll swiftly accomplish shamatha, swiftly and easily. I think that the way that I read that is that if you don't have a sense of contentment, you'll have more obstacles when you cultivate shamatha, which means that either you will not achieve it in the time frame that you have allotted for yourself, you might not achieve it at all, or just it will take you a very long time. So I think that if we don't have contentment, which means that the mind of desire, attachment is still operating, even if you try to be focused, there will always be something that will be disturbing to our mind, and we'll have to be more forceful with putting a stop to thoughts of desire, attachment, and so forth. So stable contentment, I think that is important before we enter shamatha. But when you say before we enter shamatha, I think that I can relate to that in two ways. So you can have a practice of shamatha daily, in that you incorporate into your meditation practice some aspect of shamatha, which you can develop a better sense of concentration. But in terms of attaining shamatha, which is a state in which your mind is completely at will, being placed upon an object of meditation for as long as you want to. And it is made clear in the text that it's not just a state in which you do not think of anything. It's more like you're focusing on a particular thing and your mind is completely at will, free from attachment or free from excitation and laxity. You know, to do that, for that you need contentment. Without having contentment, I think that it would be very difficult to reach that state. So I think that most of us, if not all of us, still have some levels of discontentment. We can still develop a greater degree of concentration, but without having a stable contentment, I think that it'd be hard to develop that into being an authentic, fully fledged shamatha. At least this is my opinion. So what I wanted to do now with the second part of the chapter, which is a detailed explanation of the way to train in calm abiding focused on bodhicitta. It begins with equalizing self with others. So there were two things that I wanted to do in the time that we have left. One of them is to put forward a question for discussion for you to think about, but also we can discuss it now or maybe next week. So the question is, in the sevenfold cause and effect personal instructions, when we develop bodhicitta through that, we begin with developing equanimity or impartiality. So it is called equanimity, right? Here we practice equalizing self with others. Are these two things the same or are they different? So Chuki is nodding her head. They're different, yeah. So Chuki says that they're different. As Pauline Hanson says, please explain. So Chuk is saying that the first one with equanimity, so when we follow the practice of equalizing and exchanging self with others, we recognize that we are all equal in seeking happiness and wanting to avoid suffering. So you're saying that with the practice of equalizing, exchanging self with others, which is also involved with Tonglen, we're changing our orientation. Rather than focusing on ourselves, we focus mainly on others. But I'm wondering about just when you look at the meditation process for equalizing, exchanging self with others, we begin with meditating on equalizing self with others. Then the next stage, actually kind of normally when we list down the stages in the practice of equalizing and exchanging self with others, we say that the first step is to equalize self with others. The second is to contemplate the drawbacks of cherishing oneself. Then the benefits, the third one is to contemplate the benefits of cherishing others. Then the fourth stage is the actual exchange between self and others. And then the fifth one is Tonglen meditation in order to increase our ability to care for others. So then it seems that equalizing self with others comes at the first stage. But you said that it comes back again at the end. So training, so first of all, training your mind to do it, but then you do it. Training your mind to do it, it means to regard that we're all the same. I'm wondering if people at home or whether you have more ideas about whether they are the same or equal. I'm just kind of, it's not that I have like one correct answer. And just kind of, it's good to think about it, whether we're doing exactly the same practice or whether there's slight differences between equalizing self with others or meditating on equanimity. Different. So Jason, when you say that they're different, what do you mean? All right, I guess that you're typing. In the meantime, so we'll wait for Jason to type if he's typing. So Chuk is saying that also when we look at the Lama Chopa, it says there's no difference between myself and sorry. So there's no difference between myself and others. I think that yeah, it's not the actual exchange. After that, we get to the actual exchange of self with others. Yeah. So before we investigate more, or we think more of this question, I wanted to look at the argument that Shantideva puts forward here in order to equalize oneself with others. He says, first of all, I should make effort to meditate upon the equality between self and others. I should protect all as I do myself because of equal happiness and suffering. Because of equal happiness and suffering is another way of saying because all of us are equal in seeking happiness and wanting to avoid suffering. So I thought that we can formulate like a syllogism for that in Tibetan Buddhism. Tibetan Buddhism is quite strong in formulating reason statements or syllogisms. So we can do something like that. Take sentient beings. It is suitable to protect them as I would protect myself, because just like me, they want happiness and not want suffering, and they do not want suffering. So that's how you formulate it in a syllogism. Or sometimes rather than stating it like that, you say it more simply, I should protect others as I do myself, because like me, they want to be happy and they seek no suffering. So it seems that what Shantideva is saying here is the reason for developing equanimity, or the whole premise of equanimity is not that I should see everyone is equal, but it says that I should protect all others like I protect myself, because just like me, they want to be happy and they do not want to suffer. Jason is saying one seeing all is the same, and the other is to take on the suffering of others and exchange our happiness over to them. I think that we, in the practice of equalizing, exchanging self with others, it has the meditation on equalizing self with others and exchanging self with others are different meditations. So there are different stages of the meditation. So indeed, in the whole scope of equalizing, exchanging self with others, would first begin with equalizing, and then we exchange our self-cherishing with an attitude of cherishing others. That's the actual exchange. Once we have contemplated the drawbacks of cherishing ourselves and the great benefit of cherishing others, we do the actual exchange in cherishing others and not cherishing ourselves, or reducing our self-cherishing attitude. So, sorry? Yeah, so kind of when you cherish others, you include yourself in the others, right? So you cherish others more than yourself. And cherish all beings. But still, I think that the point that I wanted to make is that in the whole practice of equalizing, exchanging self with others, there is this stage of just equalizing, and then you get to the exchange. So I'm just looking at the equalizing, I'm not looking at the exchange, just equalizing self with others. Is it the same as developing equanimity? So you say, yes, that is. Yeah, equalizing self with others. Yeah, so in this, so I'm just looking at the equalizing, just equalizing part. Is equalizing self with others exactly the same as developing equanimity? So here in this context, yes. Jason says same. So I will leave this action. So we're out of time, but rather than giving you my view on that, which again, as I say, it's just a point to think of. It's not that I have like a correct and an incorrect answer, but before giving you my view on that, maybe I'll leave this question here for you guys to think about it over the next few days, and we'll maybe mention it at the beginning of next week, so that maybe you'll have some more time to think about it, and also maybe to look at the text and come to your own conclusion. So let's leave it here for now. Thank you very much. Due to this virtue, I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all transmigratory beings without exception to that state. May the precious Supreme Bodhicitta not yet born arise. May that arisen not incline, but increase more and more. In this land encircled by snowy mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good, all powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso. Please remember to samsara ends. You uphold the Sibu's moral way, who serves in the manifold bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers, honoring the three jewels, protector of myself and others, your disciples. Please, please live long. Thank you. I'm glad that you're entertained, Ollie. Ollie is very entertained by my personal reflections. I hope that my sister doesn't watch these teachings. She'll be on to me. No, she's definitely not going to watch it. Yeah.